So I'm going to make a start, and thank you for those of you who've managed to attend live, and thank you for those of you who have already requested for the replay of the recording of today. So today is our third and final session of my Escape the Eczema Trap live event. And today is all about the questionnaire. So we've covered the 10 strands. On the first day, we did the first five strands, which are more kind of the inner strands. So elimination diet tool, gut to restore, then reintroduction tool, which I mentioned was incredibly important. It's very easy to eliminate lots, but it's really important to reintroduce and to get our diets as varied as possible again. Then the inflammation strand, we all know that when we have dermatitis or eczema, then inflammation is very much present, and it's incredibly important to get that inflammation in our immune systems working in an appropriate way and firing up when it needs to, but also knowing when to calm down. And so many people with skin issues are in that endless loop of where the immune system and inflammation just won't ever calm down. And then finally, for that first evening was the replenish strand, all of the nutrients that we're using to fight inflammation, to try and manage our healing. It's important for everybody to be well nourished. But when you're so depleted because you're using up so many of your reserves to, as I said, dampen the inflammation or replenish the nutrients that we are depleting with healing, then that replenish picture is really important. And then yesterday we went through the next five strands, the kind of more external type factors, but also the ones that are more systemic. And they're often the things that are underneath and are helping drive. They may not be triggers themselves, but they're continuing that fire from building and continuing on. So they were, and I'm going to try and remember them in order, the hormones strand, very important, not just for the female or the female hormones, but also for all hormones. But particularly, there is a link with estrogen and histamine, and often clients come to me and say that they really realize that at certain points in their cycle, their flare gets worse. Then there is the liver support hormone. We really, our liver becomes under a lot of a burden, especially when there's estrogen that might be being recycled, or we are having medications, which are really important and can be very helpful for soothing. But we need our liver to be able to do its job on its own without thinking about some kind of just a week's worth of juices. It needs to be working every day, every night. It needs to be able to clear out what's queued up to be detoxed and to come out of our system. Then the third one was the skin barrier and environmental and chemical sensitivities, because often people come to me and they're talking all about food, and food is a very important part. Whether we have a food trigger or not, food is still a very important part of the picture, but it isn't always the whole picture. And sometimes some chemicals, and somebody asked the question about chlorine that I answered yesterday, but what shampoos you use, what washing up liquid you use, do you wear gloves when you do your washing up? All of this can also have an impact on your skin. And the gut barrier itself, we have a gut barrier. There is some talk of some genetics, the filaggrin gene, but it's hard to identify. It's not in everybody with dermatitis, so it isn't a, oh wow, that's it, we've got the answer. It's all because of the filaggrin gene. And we also have a skin microbiome that talks to our gut microbiome. So it's really important that both microbiomes are supported and feel well as they communicate to each other. Then what else am I missing? The stress strand. Stress is a big deal for a lot of people with eczema, and as we talked about with the participants yesterday, it's often a vicious cycle. You have stress for whatever reason, and we do. It's prevalent in all of our lives, and it triggers a flare, and then the flare becomes unsightly. It disturbs our sleep, where it's incredibly difficult to cope with, and then we flare even more. So we're just going round and round in this flare. And I'm just trying to move to the next one, but if I move over here to my next, then they were all there and I'll be able to help a little bit better. So the last one was the histamine and MCAS. I don't know how I could have forgotten histamine and MCAS. So MCAS stands for mast cell activation syndrome. Basically, mast cells are the cells that release histamine, and histamine is part of the inflammation cascade. And we talked quite a bit about histamine and the MCAS strand yesterday. So if you're particularly interested in that, please do feel free to watch the replay from yesterday. So, what's today about? I have developed a quiz, which we're going to do bit by bit, which is all about trying to find out which are your dominant strands. And for some people, it can be one or two. For some people, it can be five. And the combination of strands are completely different for different people. So, yes, absolutely. How do you see the replays of the meeting the last 2 days? They are going to be sent in an email with a recording from this evening session tomorrow, first thing tomorrow morning. So you should get that shortly. So in terms of the quiz, this is a quiz that is a very simple quiz. It's not very scientific, but it does give a very good indication about which are the strands that might be implicated in your eczema the most. So if you have a pen and paper, grab that. You might have already had the quiz that it was supplied as a printout as part of these sessions, but if you haven't, it doesn't really matter. You can watch this and you can download it afterwards. So if you score each statement as zero, you never experience something, one sometimes, two often, and three always. And each section is scored out of 50. So let's do section one, which is elimination. So I noticed that certain foods make my skin flare within either immediately, I put 24 to 72 hours, but some people flare immediately. I do. Um, but some people take up to 72 hours before the flare becomes prevalent. So if you can score that, then the next one is I have tried removing foods before and noticed some improvement. And I have people, I spoke to somebody this afternoon who said, yes, that they've tried the elimination diet, cutting lots of things out, but they're still not very clear on what it is that they think is the true source of it. Then my eczema feels worse after eating rich or processed foods. What score would you give that? I often feel unsure which foods are safe for me to eat. That's very common in my clinic. And then the final one, my skin improves when I eat a simpler diet. So you might not be able to score all of those. Two of them might be zero. You might not have a sometimes, but the possible scoring is out of 15. So write down your score. And then, you know, do those of you who are on live, do you suspect that food is still a factor in your eczema? Would you be happy to share? I'll move on, but if I see that the comment comes, then we can always have it interactive. And oh, Sun has a diagnosed egg allergy. Very common. I have an egg allergy, and that's the absolute major trigger for my eczema. So I completely empathize. It's very much simpler when you have a diagnosis of an allergy, but it doesn't always resolve everything. And a lot of people who come to me with eczema say to me that they've done allergy tests and it comes back with no positivities at all, but they still know that they have a problem when they touch or eat that food. Okay. Unsure if there are other foods as well. Absolutely. Then the second section to find out for the second strand, where this is something important for you, is the gut repair strand. So scoring again, zero never, one sometimes, two often, four always, three always. Sorry, getting ahead of myself. I regularly experience bloating, gas, or discomfort after meals. Often find that a lot of people with eczema, there is a link between digestive issues and their eczema. I have a history of digestive issues such as constipation or diarrhea. Question two. I have taken antibiotics or other medications that may affect my gut health. Find it difficult to tolerate fiber-rich foods. And then, bit of an obvious one, but I suspect digestion might be linked to my skin. So score that and see, add it up and see how much out of 15 you score. Histamine and mast cells. Same scoring system, zero never, one sometimes, two often, three always. So first question, my skin flares after eating leftovers or fermented foods or drinking alcohol. So I know that I really struggle with pickled cucumbers. I love pickled cucumbers, but I really struggle with it. And my skin, even if I haven't been triggered by the egg, my skin tends to start to feel a little bit itchy. And it's just one of those histamine steps too far for me. Second question, I often feel itchy without a clear reason. Tell me, and somebody with dermatitis or eczema who doesn't feel like itchy sometimes without a clear reason. I experience flushing, rashes, and hives that come and go suddenly. And somebody yesterday asked me a question that I was going to follow up with this evening about, suddenly feeling very hot. And, one of the reasons behind that could be this histamine type flush. The other is the inflammation and barrier disruption, but a histamine release often gives a bit of a hot flush. If anybody's ever eaten tuna that isn't fresh tuna, not tinned tuna, that isn't quite fresh enough, you can have a really bad histamine reaction, even in those who don't have histamine issues. And you literally go this very bright red and get very, very hot. So anyway, that was a little bit of an aside. Next question. I am sensitive to strong smells, pollen, or insect bites. If you're the one who goes away on holiday, you get bitten by a mosquito, do you find that your bite swells to twice the size of anybody else's? That's another sign that there might be some histamine issues going on. And finally, my eczema feels worse during allergy season. Do you find that pollen can trigger your eczema? Now, I'm going to do a bit of a proviso on that one. Allergy season is not the same for everybody. So autumn is also a highly allergenic season. So there may not be so much pollen around, but there can be quite a lot of mold spores from piles of leaves that are getting mulched and deteriorating on their own, and that can create allergies for some people. Then, so calculate your score out of 15. And then the next one is hormone. So my skin worsens at specific times of my menstrual cycle or hormonal changes. It's not uncommon for people to say to me, I had eczema as a child, it cleared up at puberty, and then it's coming back with perimenopause or menopause. So that change and fluctuation of estrogen levels can absolutely be a trigger for flares. And then others are, like I said right at the beginning of this session, they find that it does come around cyclically anyway with their cycle every month. I experience hot flushes, night sweats, or other hormonal symptoms. So indication that your hormones are going around and you're in a flare that's not going away. I've noticed skin changes linked with pregnancy, perimenopause, or menopause. I experience mood swings, fatigue, or low energy alongside skin flares. or I have a diagnosed hormonal condition such as, for example, PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, or even thyroid issues. So we often think of the female hormones, but thyroid is also an issue. And I would have put the cortisol in this section, but it became so big it ended up having a strand of its own. So we'll be coming on to that, just in case you thought I'd missed it out. Inflammation. I experience joint pain, stiffness, or body aches alongside my skin issues. I often feel generally inflamed, swollen, or puffy, side effects of eczema that I hear about often. I have other inflammatory conditions such as an autoimmune condition or asthma or allergies. So if you're thinking about something like the atopic march, you started with one and bit by bit you got the others as well. Stress or lack of sleep makes my skin flare quickly, and I feel my whole system is overreactive, not just my skin. So do feel free to score those. And if you want to add the scoring, if you want to have four things all at three, I know I've scored it out of 15, but basically it's seeing which one of these strands scores the highest consistently. So you can add as many points as you want to. Then liver, again, never is zero, one sometimes, two often, and three always. I feel worse after alcohol, caffeine, or fatty foods. My skin flares are worse when I'm constipated. I have experienced chemical sensitivity, e.g., perfumes or liver products. So let's say you're walking through the duty free of an airport and you get overwhelmed by all perfume haul of a department store and you feel like you have to run quickly because you're overwhelmed with the smells, that kind of thing. I have a history of gallbladder, liver, or detoxification issues. And another one, which becomes more prevalent at certain times, I often wake up between 1 and 3 a.m. and or I feel really sluggish in the morning. So total up your scores for that. Reintroduction, we're at number 7. I've cut out foods but feel nervous about reintroducing them. So that's a tricky question. But I think it's a really important one. Just because we're a little bit cautious about it doesn't mean that they can't be reintroduced. And they should be reintroduced slowly, carefully, methodically, which is why I've done a whole strand about reintroduction, because it is important to reintroduce, but it's not always as easy as we think. And sometimes when you've taken something out of your diet for a very long time, it's even harder to get it back in. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't persist, but it's harder. And at every point, we need to be safe. I've tried reintroducing foods and my skin has reacted strongly. So take it back out, do other work. It may be that you can try again. It doesn't mean that you will always have to eliminate that food. I worry about missing out socially due to my restricted diet, and I would really worry about that too. The last thing I want is anybody with eczema to feel as if they have to be on such a restricted diet for such a long time that they can't go out and have a life. So, that's definitely what I want to help with. I would like a clear plan for reintroducing food safely. I'm uncertain about which foods are long-term triggers. So score that one. Sensitivities and barrier function, same scoring system. My skin reacts to soap Ooh, I'm really bad at this. I will stop touching my mouse. My skin reacts to soap, detergents, or skincare products. And I don't just mean that when your skin gets bored of something and you have to cycle it, but when, you really find that you're getting a reaction when you have it. I remember when I was a child, my mother used to pop a bit of skin on my face and I used to close my eyes, wait, feel, judge, and then say, it's okay or it's not okay. I react to environmental triggers such as dust, pets, or pollen. My skin barrier feels weak, cracked, sensitive to temperature changes. Do you find that it gets worse when the weather gets colder? Or inversely, does it get worse when it's hot and humid? What does your skin do for you? I experience flare-ups after swimming, bathing, sweating. I gave an example yesterday about some people are really good in the sea and other people can't do the sea at all and have to rinse off immediately. And then I need to be cautious about what I put on my skin. So that's the sensitivities and barrier function strand. And then I don't know why it's carried over my words a little bit when I've translated it into PowerPoint, but stress. I hope everybody can read the word stress. I notice that stress makes my skin flare, very common for a lot of people with dermatitis or eczema. I often feel anxious, tense, or overwhelmed, and that can come from our everyday life, or it can just come from having really bad eczema or dermatitis, just like I said earlier. My sleep is easily disrupted and affects my skin the next day. And conversely, it could be that your skin is so disrupted that it really damages your sleep. Both things are true. I find it difficult to relax or switch off, and my eczema flares have an emotional impact on me. It's actually known that the eczema sufferer community has higher prevalence of mental health, anxiety, and depression than the normal population. And I think that is because we're absolutely exhausted with having to cope with the flares all the time and disturbed sleep. So, I really empathize with that. So please go ahead and score that one. And then the final category for us to score is replenish my diet. So again, zero never, just a little reminder, one sometimes, two often, and three always. My diet often lacks variety or color. Our microbiome likes variety, and when we're very nervous about what we might be reacting to or not, it can be, very difficult to get that color and variety into our diet. I do not always eat enough fresh fruit and vegetables. I suspect I may be low in key nutrients. Vitamin D is a nutrient that when I did my dissertation for my master's, vitamin D is one of the things that has been studied and found to be often low in people with dermatitis. But also zinc, we need zinc for healing. Are we low in zinc because we're just gobbling up and using so much of it? Omega-3, internal moisturization, as I like to say. I rely on convenience food more than I'd like. And, who doesn't in today's world? It's really tough to try and do everything we're trying to do and come back and make a whole meal. And it's something that I believe passionately in, but I'm also realistic that, it's not always possible. And finally, my energy is low and I don't feel fully nourished. So those are the scoring. So if you just put in the list or wherever you've got it on a piece of paper or whatever, your different scores. And if you're in this session and wouldn't mind sharing, would you mind saying where you've scored highest? So maybe not today, but everyone who is watching this in the replay, you will probably find that you've got two or three that are high, and that is what generally happens. It's never just the one thing. Stress and sensitivity. Thank you for participating. Okay, that's two very interesting stands. Stress is definitely one of the most recurrent strands and issues that come back with the clients I see. And the sensitivity too. Is there anything that you've already observed with the sensitivity that you wouldn't mind sharing? Shampoos. Interesting. Any specific shampoo and cleaning detergents? Okay. Does it give you a flare or does it just dry you out? You don't need to flares. Okay, as soon as I clean with sprays. So yeah, it is complicated and it's a very common sensitivity. You know, there are quite a few chemicals, molecules that go into all of these products that we put on ourselves or use in our homes. Um, I personally, because I get these cracked and split fingers, I now use only things like bicarb. My skin doesn't like vinegar very much. It doesn't like citric acid very much either, but I wear gloves and I still think that with my split fingers, I'd rather have a bit of citric acid that gets in and stings rather than some chemical that's going to go straight in for me. But that is my personal choice. And not all of the products we react to the same. So yesterday I told a quick story about having changed washing powder and then looking as though I had chicken pox. And then I've got one other example where when I first had my son and I bought all the products and I, got ready for his first bath and I put my hands in to bathe him. And by the time I took my hands out, they were literally swelling in front of my eyes. Now, does that mean I never used any bubble bath or any of the products for my son again? No, of course I did. I used all of the creams and everything. I just didn't use that one anymore, and we gave it all away because I just couldn't use it. So we just have to find the things that work for you. An interesting point that it works with you with fairy and water as long as it's not spraying particles in the air. So, we just need to find what works. And my sensitivity strand goes through all of the different types of chemicals and, how they're grouped so that you can try and see a pattern and see things that you might want to avoid. So, basically, a high score is anything over 10. But if you've added in some, you might get some really high scores if you've changed your scoring a little bit like I suggested. So these are anything over 10 are things that are likely to be really contributing to your eczema and that should probably be your first port of call in supporting. So I said yesterday that, we can't, sometimes we could have as many as four or five of the different strands that, you know, are impacting us. And I would say that if you could choose the first two or three first really highest scoring ones and tackle those, the cascade effect can already be really helpful. That being said, I have prepared these programs and I've got three available now. They're standalone programs. I have an elimination strand, a gut repair strand, and a reintroduction strand. They're the kind of the really core basic strands that I thought would be the most useful initially. I was originally only going to do four strands overall. It's morphed into 10 different strands because I realized that, so many of these were so big and so important and so yeah, important to not just say, oh, this is just a footnote in another strand. So I wanted to make them their own things. So the other strands we're getting out as quickly as we can. But the design work is taking a little bit longer than I had hoped because I'm not very good at it. I've now got some help to make them beautiful. And we're doing these recipe books for each of the strands, which have 27 recipes per booklet, which are all very specific for each strand. That said, you can buy a three-strand bundle, and I do offers. The more strands you purchase together, the more there is an offer. So, does anybody have any questions about strands or anything that you wanted to ask about while you've got me here? Because I'd be very happy to answer any questions. And I just wanted to say one last thing because I've noticed in some of the comments tonight it's really focused on a child. These programs are not appropriate for children. I do work a lot with infants and young children, and older children. Uh, Elimination diets, we have to be incredibly cautious. It can make things worse. So I only work with those populations one to one. Um, I may develop something that's appropriate for that population later, but these specific strand programs are only available to adults because they're generalized information and they're not appropriate for a child audience, I'm afraid. But please, if you do have any questions, please do ask them. How can you book an appointment with me? If you go to jessicafontenaunutrition.com, there is a tab to book in a free introductory call, and then we can meet. And then I can say what options there are for working with me. I can hear a little bit more about what's going on, and then we can decide what's best for you. Do you need me to put my address in the chat, or is that okay? Seems to be okay. Perfect. So by the time you've got to this, you've already online, thank you very much, completed the quiz. Those of you who are watching on replay, I hope you've now completed the quiz. You've had lots of information and tips. I've tried to give as many useful bits of information as I possibly can. You know, as I said, start with your highest scoring strand or strands if you've got two that are kind of up there. And if you're unsure and it's unclear and you think, oh, yeah, I scored high on all of them and I now don't know what to do, then please do book in for the free introductory call, and I'll be really happy to guide you to say, I think these are the strands that are the most appropriate for you, or you know, maybe we need to look at this a different way. The replays are being posted, emailed tomorrow morning. That email is all ready. I just need to get this recording up and then in, and with a thank you coupon code of 20% off all my strands, whether you buy them individually or whether you buy them in bundles. And I've made that coupon valid until the end of April 2026 because I'm aware that not all of my strands are available immediately. And I thank you for your patience. And for thank you for your patience, I'm making that coupon code valid until I've got them all online, which I'm hoping will be well before April, but I'm giving myself a little bit of a margin. Please do feel free to go on my website, book in for an introductory call if you have any questions about it. And otherwise, you can email me at info@jessicafontenaunutrition.com, and I'm happy to answer any of your queries. But thank you very much for using up 3 of your evenings to come and spend time with me and or watching all of these replays. I hope I've made it worth your while and your time. And I look very much to forward to hearing your questions if you have any, or maybe liaising with you. The last thing I'll say about the strands is there will be a chat function on each strand that will stay there, so you'll be able to ask questions while you're doing the strand. And whilst you won't be working with me one to one, there still will be that touch point, and I'll be very happy to answer any questions. So thank you very much for your patience. Have lovely evenings. Take care. Bye.